So I've been trying to avoid this, but after talking to Kwachi here, who's also a big fan, I don't see any way I can continue making movies without getting making videos without getting this conversation out of the way. Let's talk about the breakdown of what happened regarding Spider-Man. Now, the deal that was struck between Sony and Marvel back in 2014, 2015, it's pretty unprecedented. Basically, Sony still retains the rights to Spider-Man and all associated characters like Venom, those people. But they reached a deal with Marvel Disney where he can now show up in MCU films and then Marvel will have a little bit of involvement making solo Spider-Man films. So, and in terms of box office revenue, Disney will basically get 5% of the cut, with Sony keeping the rest. But Disney Marvel would still own complete ownership of the merchandising rights. It seemed like a pretty good deal because Spider Man's like the most recognizable character from Marvel Comics, and Disney's like the king of merchandising. Now, in terms of like what happened earlier this week, it's still a little bit confusing, but here's the gist of it. It appears that Disney wanted to get a 50-50 financial split between them and Sony in terms of box office revenue. Now, Sony, according to more recent reports, it has been reported that apparently Sony was willing to give as much as 25%. But due to some tough negotiations from probably both sides, it looks like Sony has cut off partnership with Marvel Disney and that Spider-Man will no longer be a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Of course, there is probably going to be a lot more information in the following days and weeks regarding what exactly happened, but that's the end result. And there is still a chance that a new deal can be made, but with each passing day, that seems a less likely outcome. So, let's talk about what can happen instead of what can't happen. Option 1, do a soft reboot. Tom Holland's still on for 2 more Spider Man films. They could just keep him and other people, but essentially, it's another reboot. I don't see that working because people have associated this Spider Man, this version of Spider Man, with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. His connection to Tony Stark, the Avengers, the larger universe of heroes and villains. That's what makes this one so unique, so popular. Which is why it seems likely they'll go with option 2. Continue with the storyline they were going to do following Far From Home, but you have to cut out any reference to the larger MCU, which, again, for the same reasons, it just can't really work. So, what's an option that can be made here? Well, they could have Tom Holland's Spider Man, I guess, go up against Venom, played by Tom Hardy. Now, I know this movie has a bit of a mixed response, but it seems like this is a franchise now, and Tom Hardy's really great, and it would be cool to see this Venom go up against Spider Man, which is something a lot of fans have been asking for. Now, how exactly they can make that work would be tricky. Would they have Tom Holland play the same Peter Parker as from the MCU, or would it be like sort of like a quasi soft reboot still, where it's still played by Tom Holland, but he's not attached to the MCU going up against Venom? It'll be confusing to work out, but that's another option that's a little more likely. Not a lot, but still a little more likely to happen. Of course, there is another option that we've all been avoiding, but it has to be talked about. They could just quit with this Tom Holland version of Peter Parker. I know that seems insane, but there have been multiple accounts where there have been actors tied to play as the same character in multiple movies, with only the first movie coming out and bombing so hard that all future plans for sequels and maybe a franchise get completely wiped out. I mean, if this is the option that happens, he's made out better than a lot of those other ones. He got two solo movies, got to be part of three larger films. Sony could just decide that they're kind of done with Tom Holland as Peter Parker. No, look, I love this version of Peter Parker. I really do. I mean, I have Homecoming. I'm definitely getting Far From Home when it comes out on DVD. But that this if this does happen, it'll make a lot of people upset. And while I'm not going to get into my opinion on whose fault it is that this deal broke down, there are a lot of people that are blaming Sony for this and saying they're just going to muck Spider-Man up once again. This has all three Tobey Maguire films and both Andrew Garfield films. When it comes to the Maguire films, they may not have aged perfectly, but as far as the first two are still concerned, they still hold up fairly well and they're still very popular today, and there is a lot that got done with those two films. Spider Man 3 obviously failed due to studio interference. And same thing happened with the Amazing Spider-Man series. I liked the first Amazing Spider-Man film, and I still relatively like the second film, but again, due to studio interference, it pretty much turned any potential plans for future sequels and a franchise into nothing. Now, there is not really a single one of film from either of these five films I would say is perfect, but you can't say it was all bad. There is still a lot of good with these films. So, and may I remind you that without Marvel Studios' help, without Disney's help, Sony did help give us Into the Spider-Verse. A movie that is, in the opinion of most people, including myself, by far the best Spider-Man film, with minimal Peter Parker presence and a whole lot of presence from Miles Morales and a lot of other different versions of Spider-Man. This movie proves that there can be a Spider-Man franchise under Sony that's not entirely focused on Peter Parker, and that there is still a want and need for more Spider-Man stories just from using different characters, different ideas. And it does look like Sony is very open to this. Now, I know there's still a lot of mixed opinions regarding Venom and the franchise slash cinematic universe Sony wants to do with this film. But again, there's still a lot of people that really enjoy this film, so it's kind of hard to say this is an entirely bad film too. Basically, here's what I'm saying. Sony has made mistakes regarding Spider-Man. There is no doubt about that. But they can take what they've learned from their deal with Marvel and Disney, learn what has become popular and what works and what doesn't work. They can learn what worked with Into the Spider-Verse, learn what worked with Venom and what didn't work, and actually give us a good cinematic universe around Spider-Man and or Venom and other characters. So, look, a lot is still unclear, and it's going to be unclear for a while. I mean, a new deal could be made. It could not be made. A lot of things have to happen. But I want to stay positive. I do want to stay positive no matter what decision is made, no matter which whatever road Spider-Man and associate characters is going to go down. So basically, don't give up. maybe he can still join the MCU. Maybe he can't, but he can still make a good franchise on his own. Look, let's just see what happens, but come on. We're all Spider-Man, and we're all going to get through this. That's all I have to say right now. Like, comment, subscribe, share. I'll see you guys next time.